Good morning. Let's pray because we need it. Father, I do thank you for this morning, that you are beautiful, Lord. And I ask you, God, that you would stir our hearts, our spirits towards you and your ends. I was thinking this morning, Lord, about my time with you this morning in Haggai chapter 1, where the people of God had turned away from you to spend the resources on themselves, and they've neglected the temple. They neglected the worship that you are deserving of. And you, Lord, through your Spirit, stirred the spirits of the people there towards building up something new so they may worship you well. So may we ask, God, that you would stir our spirits this morning. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Happy New Year's Eve, everyone. I know there's quite a few of you in here this morning have had a good year, and there's some of you that have not had a great year. Some of you a little bit mixture of both, and I hope this upcoming year is wonderful for all of us. And I hope your Christmas is good. I know mine was. My kids got everything on their Christmas list that they wanted and desired. My kids are actually at a very interesting phase right now, where they're not asking for as many gifts as they used to. Now, to be fair, they only get 3, okay? Jesus didn't get any more of that than that. They don't either, all right? Now, but for somehow we've actually sort of shaped it into, like, it's broken down to 3 categories now. That was a shift this year. So it's more like 7 gifts in 3 categories. That was my wife's doing. That wasn't me. So I found that was an interesting phase to be like, wow, it's actually much harder for them to buy. How many of you are in the I'm just giving cash to my teenager phase? That's the gift. Okay, there's a couple of you out there, right? That's the phase they're not in just yet, but they'll be there soon enough, I'm sure. Another phase that my kids are in right now is an interesting one. Is they're trying all these funny tricks and phrases on me. Like they'll come up to me and be like, "Hey, Dad, are you smart?" And I'll be like, "Well, obviously." And then they'll say, "Well, spell it," right? And they want me to spell smart, but they really wanted me to spell it. Or they'll say, "Hey, Dad, can you spell I cup and then say funny colors?" You got it. Okay, it took you a second there, right? So these are the sorts of things. Now, but what they don't know, and what actually fits the book of the Bible we'll be studying here this morning, is that there's nothing new under the sun. That I actually knew all of these things about 30 years ago. And I tell them, because now I've become my father, is that I might have been born last night, but oh darn it, I messed it up. Maybe I become like my father in more ways than one that I'd like to admit. I might have been born at night, but I wasn't born last night. I often say that parenting is a lot like, people who are in a time travel movie where they go back in the past to try to convince the people to not relive all the same mistakes that they did. But the only problem is that my children are like the people in the movie who do not believe in time travel. Like, that's the issue that I have. And believe it or not, the Bible has actually given us a very similar person. A person who has lived the life that you and I are all trying to strive for, who has experienced the greatest ecstasies of life, who drank deep of the well of pleasure, and then after living out all of these things, he shares with us his conclusion about that experience. And he tells us all that we need to know about these things that we try to pursue in life, almost like a time traveler who's trying to tell us the mistakes to avoid. And yet, the only problem is that you and I are like the people in the movie who do not believe in time travel. And that person that God has given to us, if you don't know, is King Solomon. And most Bible scholars agree that the book of Ecclesiastes was written by King Solomon. He was the 3rd king in Israel's history. And many people believe that Solomon was one of the wisest people to ever live, that he was not just a smart person, but he was also a wise person, that he was properly using knowledge well. Now, for those of you who do know the life of Solomon and see some of the decisions that he's made, you wonder how wise could he have really been. But yet he lives a life filled with wealth and pleasure and prestige and glory and so much more. And he gets to the end of his life and he writes the book of Ecclesiastes. And he leaves behind for you and I, the people of God, a divinely inspired conclusion of two very specific things in life. One, what matters most in life, and two, what doesn't matter at all. And what I want to do for us this morning is I want to focus on that first conclusion of what matters most in this life. And he repeats a particular theme throughout the book, and we'll look at it in the chapter that we'll be studying this morning. He has a bunch of different conclusions about the things that matter most in life and perspectives that we need to have, but he leaves one behind specifically that I want to hone in on, and that is that each day is a gift from God. That each day is a gift from God. You know, as we begin to close this year and enter into the new year, what's interesting is that we tend to measure our lives by years, don't we? We'll say stuff like, next year I will, or I haven't done that in years, or last year I wanted to do this, right? And what Ecclesiastes and what God's trying to do through Ecclesiastes is try to regulate that kind of mindset. And he doesn't even do it by, minimizing the ways of which we measure it to like months and weeks. He wants to measure it by today. Because in all honesty, today is where we are, and today's all we got. And God is the one who has granted it to us. So let us listen to what God has to say through Solomon to teach us how to measure things by today. And we're going to be looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 13. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there now. If you need a Bible, raise your hand nice and high, and one of our ushers will get it to you. And as we go through Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 13, we are going to see three different things about life. We're going to see tough and terrific times. We're going to see a truth we rarely believe. And we're going to see today. And we're going to spend most of our time there. So turn now to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I'm going to start at verses 1 through 8. He says, there is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, and a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, and a time for war and a time for peace. Now, most of us are familiar with these words. However, we usually only hear these words in one particular context, namely when someone's passed away, or at a memorial service, or a funeral, because I think what most of the time what pastors try to do is they take advantage of the fragility of life in that moment to give some perspective. And so what I wanted to do for us this morning is I wanted to look at this through the eyes of not, hearing it through that context, but those reflecting on the reality of what's being said here, apart from that. And there's actually so much that we could actually unpack in this text because there's so much there, but I just want to point out just sort of two things to get us started here for the first 8 verses. And the first one is this, is I want you to realize that these 8 verses are a summary of the moments in life that you and I live between. He summarizes it well when he starts it off by saying there is a time and a season for everything. That all of us live between the opposite ends of these moments. These are polar opposites that he presents to us in various seasons of our lives. And then he gives us a bunch of examples. He says, we are all born, we all die. We all stop doing certain things, and we all start doing new things. We all hold our tongue when we have to, and then we speak up when we need to. We all attend weddings where we will dance and celebrate, and we will all attend funerals where we will grieve and mourn. That our lives exist between these moments, and we will experience these things in a continuum at various seasons of our life. And what he's trying to help us understand is that it is inevitable. Thinking about the topic of loss, when it comes to the topic of losing loved ones, my last grandparent passed away when I was 26 years old. And prior to me turning 18, I had lost 2 uncles and 3 grandparents, and then another uncle died in my early 20s. And as most of you know, my own father passed away a little over 10 years ago. So the Friend family has had a season of passing. We have had those times where we've gone through. I remember, I think it's all the way back from like when I was 10 to when I was like 26. There was a lot of death in our family, but for the last 10 years, we haven't lost anybody in our family. So we're really enjoying the time that we have with one another because we'd already gone through that season. But compare that to my wife's family. My wife and I are in our late 30s, and my wife has had all 4 grandparents for all of her life. Up to this year, where in this year we lost 2 beloved people, and my father-in-law's parents, they passed away in a course of, I think it was about 5 months or so. And so my wife had a season of life where she got to enjoy those people that she loved and spent time with and that she cherished. And then now she's going into this season where there's grieving and mourning and sadness. You see, my brothers and sisters, God gives us the gift of life. But those seasons that we go through, they are inevitable. And in this life, we will experience such opposite ends of the spectrum. And we cannot be surprised by it. That's essentially what he's trying to help us. It doesn't make it any easier to go through. But we will all go through them. We will all go through joy and sadness, through highs and lows, through loss and gain, through blessing and heartache. We will all go through abundance and want. We will all go through confidence and uncertainty. You want to live a full life? Just be alive. You'll experience it. You'll experience all the good that life has to offer and all the bad as well. And the second thing I want to point out from these first 8 verses is that good and bad things happen to good and bad people. Good and bad things happen to good and bad people. He was very impartial of how he laid that out for everybody. There is a time and a season for everything. He talks about that in hurt and healing, in death and birth, in war and peace. And the Bible is trying to teach us this over and over and over again. However, society is obsessed with the idea that good always equals good and bad always equals bad. Because you'll hear the people who go, well, the universe got you back for what you did. Or the universe blessed you because you did that certain thing. I just have a question for the universe people. What is the universe? I don't understand. I mean, these are the same type of people who will be like, well, I don't believe in God, but I believe in the universe. Like you don't believe in a personal creator God who designed you, who loved you, who's trying to speak intentionally to you through his word, so much so that he loved you, that he sent his one and only son to die in your place so that you could have your sins forgiven and live with him. Rather, you believe in an impersonal, accidental creator that doesn't really care anything about you, but somehow in some way knows that you've done a good or bad thing in this life and that they're going to bless you because of that. Make it make sense, people. It doesn't make any sense. And this also goes in line with the very Eastern worldview that our culture has adopted in karma. Karma is a popular framework with which people see the world through. And I actually think it's appealing probably because it brings balance to things, right? It's a formula to understand what's going on. You see, good begets good and bad begets bad. If something bad happens to me, it's because I did something bad. If something good happens to you, it's because you did something good. And let me just tell you this morning, that's not a healthy way to view life. Why? First of all, it doesn't line up with reality. And second of all, it's fear-driven and it's still self-driven. Why be good? So that nothing bad happens. So something bad happens, I must have done a bad thing. But then what about those people who do bad things? They're evil, downright evil people, but they find that good things come to them all of the time. Right? You know those types of people. It's like some of the most terrible, evil people in the world, and yet they have some of the most power and the most wealth in the world, and they have access to the things that we wish we had access to, and they've been blessed in such a way that we can't understand. How do the karma people make sense of that? Because I thought that wasn't the formula. But the Bible is trying to tell us over and over again, including here, that good and bad things happen to good and bad people. Why? Because that's the reality of life. Obviously, there's some basic like human principles of human decency and morality that if you know, they go a long way to keeping you out of trouble, right? So if you don't rob banks, you won't go to jail, right? Something simple like that. You know, things that are common sense. Now, I just want to remind us all that if you live in this world, you're exposed like a nerve to the impact of sin, the disorder, the imbalance, the injustices that we see where bad people get wealth and relatively good people get illness. Doesn't make any sense. But the perspective of life, this perspective of life that Solomon's tried to give to us, that the Bible provides for us in many different ways over the course of its pages, provides for us a healthier understanding of life. Why? Because it keeps the blessed from becoming too proud, and it keeps the unfortunate from being too down. The good that you're experiencing in life, it's given by the mercy and grace of God. The bad you're experiencing in life, for some reason, unknowing to us, it's allowed by the sovereign hand of God. But yet, we have hope that He does things and He allows things by His great sovereignty in order to bring about His good purposes in this world. And He hasn't let us down yet. And so I think these are the things that help us to have this perspective. Job had this same perspective. Remember what he said to his wife after they lost nearly everything, including their children? She comes to him and she says, "Curse God and die." And what does he say to her? He says, "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? Are we only going to praise God when the good things happen and not maintain that praise when the bad things come?" He gives and He takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. What Solomon is trying to tell us in these verses is that life plays no favorites when it comes to circumstances, that we all experience these seasons one way or another. It is inevitable. Author David Gibson, in his book, Living Life Backwards. It's a fantastic book that really influenced this sermon. I highly recommend it. It's on the book of Ecclesiastes. He says this, he says, the message of Ecclesiastes is not that life is full of good and bad times and so you just have to roll with the punches. Rather, the message is that life is full of good and bad times that we cannot control. But patterning our lives in this way is part of the bigger pattern that God controls. And so, since that's true, shouldn't that encourage us to raise our awareness of the sweetness of the good moments that we're in and to appreciate deeper the things and the people while we have them? More on that in a little bit. So not only in life do we have tough and terrific times, but also there's a truth we rarely believe. I'm sure you're curious about this. Verses 9 through 11. He says, "What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end." So there's a couple things going on here. So two things I want to highlight. The first is that each day that God gives us, we wake up, we work, we toil, we make decisions, we try to control certain situations. Some of us try to manipulate things and manipulate people, all for a desired outcome that we want. But what Solomon is trying to tell us is that though we work, we toil, and we try to control, it's just a cute exercise in finding out how out of control we really are. That I think sometimes the way we try to control our lives is trying to balance an elephant on our nose. It is a tall task, and it will crush you if you try to do that. And the second thing I want to highlight from my NIV study Bible is these great notes at the bottom, and I thought this one was particularly helpful. He says this, verse 11 summarizes the chapter. He says, "God's beautiful but tantalizing world is too big for us, yet its satisfactions are too small. Since we were made for eternity, the things of time cannot fully and permanently satisfy." Because the truth that we rarely believe is this: the world cannot satisfy, and God is enough. You see, We know that God's word tells us that the things of the world cannot satisfy. We have secular people who have even concluded that it's, the top of the mountain is the loneliest place. Or, a Christian author who once said the loneliest moment in life is when you've just experienced what you thought would deliver the ultimate and it has let you down. And yet we continue to pursue temporary things over eternal things. And this proves often that we don't believe that God is enough. He tells us in this verse, he says, he has put eternity on our hearts. And so what we need is eternal things to find satisfaction, to find contentment. And it's not to say that temporary things or pleasures are evil, but rather they cannot be our pursuit in life for satisfaction, because everything except for the things of God have a shelf life. And what do I mean by this temporary versus eternal things? Actually, Jesus clues us into this. It's interesting about what he points his followers to. Rather than the pursuit of wealth, he tells his followers to pursue being generous people. Rather than the pursuit of social capital, he tells everyone to play no favorites and love everyone equally. And rather than the pursuit of glory, he tells us to use our influences for the benefit of others. Rather than the pursuit of power, he tells us to die to self regardless of our power. He aims at the heart of a person to change us from the inside out, that we may become more like him regardless of who we are or where we are in life. That what Jesus desires for his followers is that they would have their hearts to be shaped more and more like the people will be forever. To become like him. To live and love like Jesus. Wealth is going to dry up. Social capital will run out. The glory of men will end. Happiness is circumstantial, and power will all be given over to God one day. But generosity, love, selflessness, joy in the Lord, and dying to self for the sake of others, that is the kind of stuff that lasts forever. You see, the Lord has in mind not for us to acquire stuff, but to become someone, to be like Jesus. He is our mold, our model, and our standard. And each day is a gift from God to be shaped into his image and to be like the people will be forever. And finally, we will see the importance of today, today, today. Verses 12 through 13. He says, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. So Solomon begins to draw some conclusions here. What do we do with these truths of the fragility of life and the value of eternal things? What do we do, he says, very specifically, while we live, meaning in the moment that we're in? How do we find satisfaction in the midst of our current toils? Once again, my NIV study Bible gives us a note that really helps us. He says this, he says, God's people find meaning in life when they cheerfully accept it from the hand of God. Let me say it another way. Treat the present as a present. There's a woman in our church, her email send-off is, each day is a gift, open it prayerfully. And that is true. And that's what I want to remind us and what Solomon and God want to remind us about here this morning. So how do we become more present with the present? By accepting the present as a gift of God. You ever watch a child open up a present? Especially one they see as incredible value, right? That moment is the single greatest moment in their life when they open it up. That we should all be opening up our days like my son opens up Pokemon cards, okay? And some of us open up our days like we're 8-year-olds opening up a present that has socks in it, okay? That's kind of how we are. And do you all realize that you have made it to today? Do you realize that you are sitting in this room, that your mind is thinking, that God is allowing your heart to continue to beat, that your soul is absorbing, that your emotions are pumping, that your lungs are expanding and contrasting? You're alive, folks. You may want to be anywhere else than in this room listening to me right now, but you are alive this morning. Do you know that they estimate between 150,000 and 160,000 people die globally each day? Now, I know that's actually a pretty small percentage given the global population, but hey, you weren't one of them, okay? You know, and all of us are at different places in our life right now too, right? Some of us are in retirement, some of us on college break, some are single, some are married with kids, some of you are trying to make ends meet, some of you are trying to figure out, you got some disposable income, so which room in the house are we going to remodel next? Some of you are in a job that you love, some of you are in a job you do not love, right? And what God is trying to say here through Solomon is that we need to have the right heart, mind, and attitude to be present in the present. Not where we've been and not where we want to be. Where we say, okay, God, this is where you have me right now. Use me. Teach me. Show me in this situation, in this circumstance, how I can love you and how I can love others. Now, that doesn't mean don't make any decisions to get you where the Lord has you going next, but be faithful in the now. And I know that being present in the present is so hard for so many of us, and for a variety of different reasons. For some of us, it's circumstantial, and for some of us, it's other reasons. I know that being present in the present can be difficult for me, and I'll tell you specifically why. Many years ago, this might not surprise some of you, is that I was diagnosed with ADHD. And I was actually on Ritalin all the way up to my start of high school. My wife would say, you probably should get back on it, right? And so because I have ADHD, I can appreciate a good ADHD joke, such as how many kids with ADHD does it take to screw in a light bulb? Want to go ride bikes? I got more laughs than jeers out of that one. Use this at the 11. Okay, all right. And so for those who have ADHD like myself, it really is a double-edged sword. Maybe you have it, maybe your kids have it, because on one hand, I can be laser focused and complete a task with precision, and on the other hand, I am completely distracted all of the time, right? This is a safe space, right? This is confession's a good place? Okay. The last 2 years in this room for me on a Sunday morning has been really challenging for me. Because people, I used to be in the basement, and so no one really cared about me. And now I'm up here, and it's like people want to talk to me all the time. And so, as a person in this room who, when I'm talking to somebody, and then in my periphery, I see like 6 other people that I know I need to talk to. And it's hard for me to be, stay focused in a particular conversation because there's like 275 people per service, and there's a lot of people to talk to. Adam and I actually often joke about how he likes to have one 15-minute conversation, and I like to have 15 one-minute conversations. But what I have learned and what the Lord has taught me, especially in the last, I would say, about 4 months, is that ministry is of such a great value to being present with people. So I actually have to work really hard to hone in on who I'm talking to. I have to square my shoulders. I have to look people in the eyes. I got to keep my hand off my phone. All these sorts of things I have to do to be able to be present in the present. Because sometimes you hear someone say of another person, they're like, when I talked to them, they acted as if I was the only person in the room. And I'm sure that some of you, when you've talked to me, you have not said that about me. And that's okay. I'm working on it because that's who I want to be. Because the best ministry that I can give is those who need it in that moment is my full and undivided attention, because that moment with that person is a gift from God. And I want to treat it that way. And so for the rest of us, it can be hard to be present for you for many different reasons, right? There's texts coming in. You got to get to the next thing that's on the schedule. You're trying to solve a problem from work in your head outside of work, so it distracts you at home. And I'm actually convinced that there is 2 things that keep us from being present. And you know what the irony is? I believe that they are the past and the future. When it comes to the past, we're all navigating through things that have shaped us, that have hurt us, that have molded us to who we are in this very moment. That every moment that we show up to stand before other people we are standing as people who have been shaped by our pasts up to that moment. So we can't help but bring with us what Chuck DeGroat calls the long, invisible bag we drag behind us. And what our temptation is that we want to cut the bag off and ignore it and put it away. But that's not healthy, because rather we need to open up that bag and we need to take things out one at a time so they may deal with it and heal from them. But not only do I think the past keeps us from being present, but actually much more the future, because we're constantly thinking, what's next? We're trying to fill our calendars, we're trying to stay busy, we're trying to pursue the next challenge, and a lot of that actually brings a lot of worry and anxiety into our hearts. And believe it or not, the Bible has two very specific things to say about this. The first one comes from James chapter 4, verses 13 through 16. He says, "Now listen, you who say today or tomorrow, we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why? You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil." It's pretty straightforward, folks. You know, James has a little Solomon in him. I don't know if you noticed that, right? And he tries to give the people of God a particular perspective, that we constantly approach life as though tomorrow is guaranteed. But what if you and I treated this moment as this might be the last time I see this person or go to that place? And the tomorrow isn't guaranteed perspective increases our awareness of the moment. It makes today a gift. Think about it this way. Think about the things and the people that you have lost over the years. When you reflect on when you had those things or when you had those people, doesn't it make you realize now how precious those moments were, now that you can't have them anymore? That's why Solomon also tells us in Ecclesiastes is that death teaches us more than laughing ever will. That in some way, the perspective of death teaches us that we should have laughed more in those moments and enjoy them deeper than we do. Modern day philosopher Andy Bernard said in the final season of The Office, one of the best lines of the show, by the way, he says, "I wish there was a way to know you're in the good days before you've actually left them." Well, we do, Andy. You want to know how we know? When the sun rises that morning and you rise with it. Today is that day, and those moments before you are a gift from the hand of God. And Jesus tells us, don't worry about tomorrow. He says in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, so don't worry saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble on its own. Jesus is reiterating the value of today. Why? Because it's all we've got, folks. He's trying to remind us that God will take care of us. He's giving us this, earlier in this passage, he gives us this beautiful illustration about the birds. He gives us this everyday reminder of the value of our lives and that God loves us by looking at the birds. He says, look at the birds. And because you look at the birds, remember this thing, that worry chokes out the now because we're so afraid of what can come, so it's hard to be in what is in this particular moment. So instead of always wondering, what's next, what's next, what's next, we need to pay attention to what's now. And as we close, I want to try to answer a question for us is, how can we be present? How can we be more present in the present, to treat each day as it is a present? And these are not all prescribed by the Bible, because the Bible doesn't give us a running manual of how to enjoy the moment, right? It doesn't give us that. But these are some practical things that I have been trying to do over the course of the last couple of years. And I'll just go through them very briefly, and I hope that they stick with you. The first is give thanks to God when you wake up and when you lay your head down. When you open your eyes in the morning, or you sense your consciousness in the morning, say, thank you, Lord, for waking me up today. And then when you go through your day and you lay your head down at night, and whether or not it was a good or a bad day, you say, thank you, God, for giving me this day, regardless of what it is. Because here's the reality of folks, there are as many of us who are going to open our eyes and wake up one morning, and we will not lay our head down that night. So remembering that gratitude is a much necessary tool to remind us to be grateful and present in our days. Number 2 is to ask God to keep you faithful in what's on the schedule and open to what's not, but what will be. I know there's quite a few type A people in here. I'm a recovering type A person, and I like to have a rigid schedule of like how things go, and if it gets thrown off, I get annoyed. I feel like, I've said this before, as people are most annoyed when they're most inconvenienced, right? And so what I know is that we have our schedules, we have things on our schedules, and sometimes things change. And that's okay. That'll happen, but you'll have to, stop seeing interruptions not as inconveniences, but unscheduled opportunities for new ministry. That God's sending that person in a different direction and you in another one, and maybe, just maybe, there's someone that you're supposed to run into. Someone that God has to put in your path along the way to help you connect with them or invite them to church or do something that would point them to his hope. So be faithful in what's on the schedule and be prepared for what's not, but inevitably will be. Number 3, learn to pause and praise God. Don't just fly through your day. Find times to intentionally or sense that you need to pause and say thank you to God for a particular moment. I could think of 2 off the top of my head right now. I remember years ago, it had to be like 8 years ago. I remember we had just like gotten back from Appalachia. So I saw a lot of different ways of which people were living lives. And I had, gotten the groceries, put the groceries in the fridge, and I had this overwhelming sense that I wanted to raise my hand and praise God for a full fridge. Because he's the one who gave me that full fridge. And another is when I try to take the trash out at night. I think of it especially in the terms of the fall when it's that cool, crisp air. And I, come back around the back of my house. And behind my house, I have my flat top of my garage. And I look out and I have a beautiful sense of the night sky. And I look and I just give thanks to God for the ways he's blessed me in this life. And the last but not least is enjoy people when you're with them. Yesterday, I was up in Erie visiting my family for Christmas, and for many years I used to go home, and I'm such a nostalgia monger. Like I used to go into my attic and look at old photos and try to hunt down this old feeling of a time that once was. And you know what that really did for me? That kept me from being present with my family in those moments to make new memories with them. And so this year, God really prompted me to actually went home in November, and I threw out a lot of my old stuff. And at Christmas and Thanksgiving this year, I was finally able to be present with my family. And my family, if you don't know them, they believe a lot different stuff than I do. They vote differently than they do. They see God differently than I do. There are a lot of different people. But you know one thing I'm not going to do? I'm not going to lay on my deathbed and go, gee, I wish I was more of a jerk to my niece because she didn't see God the way that I did. I'm not going to say that. I want to love these people. I'm the only Christian they know. And that matters. And so I'm not going to beat them up because of who they're voting for. Time's too short for that, folks. And so, enjoy people while you're with them. So as we end this year, I want you to remember to enjoy today, and if tomorrow comes, be present in it, because I want to remind us as we close, each day is a gift from God, because today is all we have, so open it prayerfully. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you for your word. Thank you for your truth. Thank you for reminding us that you indeed have given us today as a gift from you. May in our hearts of hearts remember that and try to hold on to the words of Ecclesiastes that tell us that while we live, may we eat and drink and enjoy these things because this is a gift from God. Let us be present in the present. Remember all the ways you've blessed us. Be with us in Jesus' name. Amen.